Hi everybody and welcome to the Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys throw all sorts of Disney questions my way, whether it's about the history or the parks or the movies, and I try to answer them to the best of my ability. I've got a handful of really good questions this week, so without further ado, let's just dive right in. Our first question is a what if, and it comes from Noah the Guy, who asks, if GE continued to sponsor Horizons through the 90s, do you think it would have lasted longer? If so, how much longer? So, of course, GE dropped their sponsorship of Horizons, I think in like 1993. It was the early 90s, and so it closed temporarily, reopened a little bit later, and then eventually closed permanently. And there was no official answer given as to why it was closing permanently. The assumption is because there was no corporate sponsor. There are rumors that go around that there were like structural problems with the roof, or that it was sinking, or it just wasn't built well enough. But there are no like solid sources on that. So really the best guess we have to go with is just nobody was willing to pay for it. And it was sort of an old attraction at that point, or it was becoming one. So I think the easy answer is yeah, if GE decided that they were going to keep sponsoring it, that's part of that is paying for the upkeep, you know, over like a typically 10-year period. If we're assuming that they pulled out of their sponsorship in 93 when it ran out, then assuming they're renewing it, then, you know, it would have lasted however long that renewal was. If the rumors are true that it was a structural thing, maybe it would have lasted a little less, and then they would have had to refurbish it. I'm not really sure, but I mean, that's a tough what if, because it really depends on knowing for sure why they closed it, and that's something Disney's never really talked about, and hopefully one day they will give a definitive answer. Usually it just ends with being, you know, well, we made this decision. And it's smart for a company to do that because ultimately they don't want to burn any bridges. So they don't want to be like, well, GE was cheap and they didn't want to pay. So, you know, maybe one day we'll get like a tell-all from somebody who used to work at Disney. Good question, though. It would have lasted long enough for me to get to ride it one more time. So it's good enough of a what if that I wish it happened. But, you know, that's how it all turns out. Our next question comes from David Hoyden, who asks, did you see the Walt Disney American Experience? What are your thoughts on it? I thought it was very educational and entertaining, and I learned a lot about him, the company, and the struggles. Thanks, and have a magical day. Of course, David's talking about the Walt Disney American Experience. It was a documentary on PBS. It was a two-parter. It was, I believe, an hour and a half to 2 hours each. It was nearly a 4-hour experience. And I thought it was a really fantastic look at Walt Disney's life. I thought it was very fair. It didn't portray him as an evil person. It didn't portray him as a saint. It did what was, I think, the most realistic course, which is he was a genius who did a lot of great and changed a lot, but had many flaws like anybody else in the world. I think it was great to focus on that. I think there has been some backlash from like diehard Disney fans who don't appreciate that it focused a lot on his troubles, and you know, admittedly, there are parts that I think take liberties into assuming what his mental motivations are for things, which I think is a interesting thing to talk about. But in something like a documentary like that, it's tough to do because you don't want to claim it as fact if you don't know, because if he's not around to say whether or not he built something for a certain reason or another, all we have is what we know as facts. That said, I think it was great that we saw some of the negative aspects about him being on the wrong side of the Red Scare, and just the way he sort of treated workers. I think it was great. I think it's something that any Disney fan should definitely check out. I think it's worth a watch. I think anybody who's seen it and enjoys it should definitely go on and check out some of the biographies about Walt, because I don't want to sound like, oh, there was a lot there that I knew already. It's no big deal. I mean, there were some things that were completely new to me, but there were some things I had already known because of the biographies. And the biographies actually, oh no, my phone. The biographies actually go more in depth into some parts of it. I mean, there were aspects of his life that they sort of skim over in 10 or 20 minutes and then move on that go really in depth into the books. And that makes sense because it was a 4-hour documentary as is, and they didn't want it to be a 6-hour or 10-hour documentary. So, you know, it was important that they keep it formatted for video, but totally worth watching. If you want, I think PBS's website has it that you can watch. I don't know how permanent that's going to be, but it's also on iTunes for like $8, which I think $8 for a 4-hour documentary is a pretty good deal. So you should check it out. Our next question comes from Carly Page, who asks, I know you don't completely like the idea of a fifth gate, But if they did open another park, what do you think it would be themed as? Thanks. So I saw this question, and I was about to like sort of ignore it because that is a question I get a lot. What would the fifth gate be themed on? But I decided to answer it, and I think because thinking about it made me realize why I'm so against this idea of a fifth gate. I mean, obviously I've talked about how I'm against the idea of a fifth gate because I think there's just so much improvement and work that can be done to the previous four that it would seem silly to put so much resources and money into a completely new park. But I also think that question seems so outdated, right? What would it be themed as? You think of the Magic Kingdom, which is sort of themed about these multiple things. But then you think of Epcot, which is sort of like the future and World Showcase. And then you have MGM, which was originally about the movies, and the Animal Kingdom is about animals. But I think we are entering an era where, you know, a fifth gate can't just be a singular theme. You need more variety than that. And so it's a tough question to answer because, you know, it's like saying, what would you theme the Magic Kingdom as? Because there are so many distinct lands, and each of those lands have attractions that have different themes. And so what is the Magic Kingdom themed as? You know, I think that's the sort of park we would see, something with a lot of variety, something that Hollywood Studios is turning into. And there's a question coming up that sort of addresses that a little further. So I don't think there would be a theme. I think it would be more of a catch-all park that would just gather all, you know, I think we'll see a fifth gate maybe when, you know, they have enough intellectual property that's not covered where they can go, hey, you know, we need a space for this, 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 and this, and we'll just make a park for it and we'll give it a name. And I think that'll be a long time coming because, as you can see, they've announced plans for, you know, the Toy Story expansion and Star Wars Land, and we just finished New Fantasyland, and there are a lot of rumors swirling that their next site is going to be set on Epcot, and I'm really happy at these rumors because it's doing what I'm thinking they should do, which is focus on the parks that are there rather than on the parks that don't exist yet. But I think it would be just sort of like a catch-all, and then it would just have some like generic-ish name that would keep it open so that they could add whatever they wanted. Interesting question, though. I mean, I think that era of themed parks, like singular themed parks, is coming to a close. I think the Animal Kingdom was sort of it. Next question comes from B-Fish Alex Imagineering, who asks, with all of the refurbishments happening in Hollywood Studios, here's that question, many of them remove Eisner's concept for a half theme park, half functional movie studio. What are your thoughts on this and some of the new things coming to Hollywood Studios? And how do you think it will affect the theme of the park as a whole? So, yeah, we're losing a lot of stuff, and we're getting a lot of stuff, and that changes what that park was. When it was back when it was MGM Studios, it was meant to be sort of a functional movie studio. And sure, they did some production there, but not really as much as they wanted. I mean, I don't think it ever reached the potential it meant to. Yeah, they did some animation there. Yeah, they did some shooting there. But you have to realize Eisner really wanted, like, he wanted a functional Floridian movie studio there, and it never really panned out that way. And that's why I'm okay with the idea of taking that theme away. I think what they're adding, Star Wars and Toy Story Land, still keeps this focus on films, which is sort of what the parks has generally become about. Whether it's like, you know, your Sunset Boulevard, where it's just sort of old school Hollywood, or, you know, you've got the themed Indiana Jones and Star Wars. I think it's just still revolves around movies. I'm still cool with that. I'm really psyched for Star Wars Land. I'm really excited for Toy Story Land. It's funny because time flies. I know today it feels like it's so far out in the future, but I'm sure there'll be a day where I'm in Hollywood Studios and I'm like, I can't believe I remember when they announced this, and that's going to be really excited. But like, it goes to what I said earlier. I think we're getting into this era where theme parks are a catch-all, and you have the lands that are themed rather than the park that's themed, and we're seeing that with all of these themed lands happening. Our next question comes from Nat Dancer, who asks, do you think they should get rid of Toontown in Disneyland? Why or why not? Thanks and have a magical day. No, I don't think they should, Natalie. I think the core five, or the Fab Five as they call it, which is Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Donald, Pluto, are still core to Disney, and I think they should have a home. Am I in support of them like refurbishing Toontown Land? I mean, or Toontown in Disneyland? Yeah, I'm all for that. Granted, I don't come from a very educated position on this. I've only been there once. You know, everything felt new to me the first time I was there, so I'm still a-okay with everything that is there. But, you know, I think it'd be interesting to retheme it a little bit. The aesthetics of Toontown are very 1990s style, in my opinion, and maybe it's just because they're very reflective of what we had in the Magic Kingdom in Florida. So maybe if they updated the aesthetics, again, I always come back to it, and I'm sorry if it sounds repetitive, but I love it so much. The new Mickey Mouse cartoon series that's been out in the past couple of years, the new Mickey Mouse shorts, I love those. I love everything about them. I love the storytelling and the art design. I love the length and the format. I just love everything about it. And so if you could retheme Toontown to be more like that, 100% go for it. I think that'd be fantastic. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I think that would look cool. I think that'd be something that younger people would connect with more since they're watching that series. And then it would definitely make me want to go back to Disneyland. Our next question comes from Paul Hyman, who asks, have you heard of Dismayland? It's an art showcase by Banksy with a futuristic and dismal theme to it. It has a Disney theme, but broken down and abandoned. Do you think the Disney company will sue? Thanks and have a magical day. So yeah, I've heard of Dismayland. I've seen photos of it. Banksy's totally into doing stuff like this. It looks like a very abandoned and run down Disney. To answer your question though, no, I'm almost certain Disney's not going to sue. They're not going to do anything about it. One, it's art. And it would be wrong of Disney to do anything about it. Yeah, we're all Disney fans, and yes, this definitely takes the Disney mentality and portrays it in a negative light, but, you know, he's an artist, and that's his right to do so, and as far as I can tell, it's parody. You know, nobody's going to look at Dismayland and go, whoa, Disney got really dark. No, they're not going to think for a second Disney's behind it. They're going to think it's criticism of Disney, and that's fine. That sort of art should always be protected. On top of that, I think Disney's actually very smart about avoiding the Streisand effect. And the Streisand effect is this idea online, or formulated online, that the more you try to hide something, the more it will be publicized and noticed. And so if they sued Banksy, what are the news articles going to be? Disney suing Banksy over Dismayland. And then you're going to have everybody who's never heard of Dismayland going, what's Dismayland? And they're going to look into it. And now the thing that Disney wanted to shut down and hide is now in the spotlight and being read about and seen by people who never heard of it. And Disney's smart. You know, there have been movies that I think portray Disney in a negative light that they've been smart enough to avoid publicizing or going after because it would just give it more of a spotlight that they don't want to give it. So I don't think they'll do anything about it. And, you know, I think it would be wrong for them to, because it's art at the end of the day. And that sort of art should be protected. Our last question this week comes from Copycat705, who asks, what did you think of Disneyland's Tomorrowland, as in the land itself? Although I've never been to Disneyland to experience it personally, I hear from a lot of people that it is in need of an overhaul. So I want to know what you thought of it. When I get over the shock of like, whoa, it's so different from Disney World. This is crazy from everything I've known. Yeah, I think both Tomorrowlands, to be honest with you, could do for a refurb. And it's not to keep it up with the times, right? We've sort of abandoned the idea that Tomorrowland's about the future. It's more about our look back at how we thought the future was going to be. But I think it could do for, yeah, an overhaul and sort of like a centralized theme. It's funny because this question's coming at a great time because just yesterday I read this great 6-page introspective at Alien Encounter. And it was all about the history of it and sort of it skirts around how Tomorrowland as a whole changed. And it made me realize that, yeah, Tomorrowland, when they relaunched it in the 90s, really had a unified theme. And a lot of the original and sort of unified attractions got changed into like tie-ins with movies, right? You had Alien Encounter, you had Dream Flight, and you had the Timekeeper. And those got replaced with, you know, Stitch and Buzz Lightyear and Monsters, Inc., which none of which are really like Tomorrowland fitting. I mean, yeah, okay, Buzz Lightyear and Stitch is in space and Buzz Lightyear is a space person. But that's the problem. The problem is Imagineers shouldn't look at Tomorrowland and go, oh, it's a bucket for anything that's slightly futuristic themed. You know, it should have its own theme. I think that'd be really cool. And so I would love to see a return to that. I mean, goodness knows, Monsters, Inc. sort of coming to the end of its lifespan, I think. I think that attraction could do for a refurb. I think Stitch can definitely go. I do think that after reading that article, it made me realize that I don't think it's a really good attraction from an objective, like, company perspective. I think it has a lot of problems with who it's being marketed to or who it's meant to appeal to. And then I think Buzz Lightyear is sort of redundant now that we have Toy Story Midway Mania. So why not get rid of all three? Why not put something original in all three of them? Why not use that as a shot in the arm to Tomorrowland? Get rid of Tomorrowland Speedway. God knows that needs to go. That is a giant waste of space. Yeah, sure, fond memories, but it just isn't applicable anymore to Tomorrowland. And leave Space Mountain and Carousel of Progress and the Tomorrowland Transit Authority, and you can even leave Astro Orbiter, and just replace the rest and sort of give it a new, fresh coat of paint. Now, to Disneyland is similar. They've got their Innoventions area. I believe that was closed when I was there. They didn't have a TTA running. Their Astro Orbiter was out front. Seemed really weird. Star Tours was there, which I thought would have been in California Adventure, but hey, you know, who am I to judge? So I think it could definitely use a refurbishment. And I think you could use a visual one too. Not to say that it needs to look really futuristic, but I think we could refine what we theme as, you know, retro sci-fi. I think give it a more consistent and maybe a more, I don't know, blending of retro sci-fi with modern sci-fi aesthetics, because, you know, we are going to get to the point where that does look a little tacky, and I think that would be a great land to visit next. You know, they're doing Avatar Land, Toy Story Land, Star Wars Land. Okay, afterwards that, please take care of Epcot. Take any of my ideas, Disney. Please, just take any of them. I'll be glad if you use any of them. But after that, go back to Tomorrowland. Go redo Tomorrowland. I'm 100% behind it. I want to know what you would like to see out of a new Tomorrowland if they were to do that next. Let me know in the comments below. And if you have a question for me, feel free to leave it in the comments below as well, or let me know on Twitter. I'm at RobPlays. I want to thank you all for watching. Whatever you're doing this week, make the most of it because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.